Hi folks, what I have for you today is going to be a massive upgrade to a Game Boy Advance. I've got a delivery from FunnyPlaying. You can see the logo there on their tape. That has a FunnyPlaying IPS V2 kit and a shell in there. And what I'm going to do is use this Game Boy Advance that was restored. I say restored, it was sold as not working. The ribbon cable for the screen was loose and that was it. So I seated it back in and it works. So I think this one's a good contender. There's a few scratches on the shell and it's kind of beat up. And I feel like I've got tons of these Glacier shells, especially this has got the battery cover missing, so it'll be a good one to reshell. Just to show it works. Nice and loud speaker as well. So this is a working board. These were aftermarket buttons and these are like really hot. In fact, they don't even press. So yeah, it's time to get rid of this OEM / aftermarket crossover and these colors and just go with an entire new shell, buttons, and I'll probably need to reuse the membranes, but that's fine. Disconnect screen, there's the board. I'm going to do clicky buttons for the shoulder buttons, replace them, a shell replace, a screen replace, and also a rechargeable battery mod. Now I haven't quite decided yet whether I want to make it have the USB, this will be a USB type B I think, port at the bottom cut out. Well, I'll decide on that when I get to that stage. So back to the board itself then. As I said, everything is pretty much in excellent condition for this board. I mean, it is as clean as it probably came out the factory. Barely any dust on it, absolutely no corrosion. I don't quite understand how there is no dust to it, and secondly, how the screen or the ribbon cable that when the person sold it said it wasn't working, all it needed to do was push the ribbon cable in and just fit it, which kind of tells me that the person who had it before me didn't take it apart. So that's good. So yeah, I'm gonna, I would like to use, yeah, I think I will use the hot air station since these shoulder buttons, it doesn't matter if the hot air kind of, I say destroys them, if it starts to melt the plastic, it doesn't matter too much. Although thinking about it, I need this bracket kept in place. So actually, it'll just be the soldering iron for now. So let's go ahead and turn that on. For something like this where you want to remove two solder points at once, in fact, what I'm probably going to have to do before that is trim off the little plastic tabs down, holding it into the holding it onto the bracket. So just get a pair of flush cutters. I mean, scissors would probably do the job, but you need to get in into these. It's quite difficult to get in. So if you see here, the best I can show you on video, just get in there and snip off the plastic. Like I said, since these are going to be removed and no longer needed, focus there. It doesn't really matter too much if you, I don't want to use the word destroy them because that's a bit extreme, but if you do damage to them, that means they aren't going to work properly going forward. It doesn't really matter because these are being replaced because they are not as good and you don't want them in the system. There we go. There we go. So I touch both of the pads. Come on, fellas, come on through. There we go. So you don't want to have these top legs on, because if they touch anything, including the bracket, oops, just be careful snipping them off. They fly off real quick. Yeah, you don't want it touching that bracket that it sits on or get support from, because that will complete the circuit and it'll probably think you're pressing the shoulder button like thousands of times a second. One done, time to do the next. So I think what I'll probably do is just bend two of the legs out, get them nice and straight, and then just pre-cut off the other two because they're not needed, and just get in the way. So let's spin that around. That will obviously need to sit like that. So again, get this in as comfortable position as you can. So I think what I'll try and get is enough solder on here that I could touch them both at the same time, but I'll do the solder in just in a second. This is kind of wiggling its way through. There's probably people watching cringing at how I'm doing this, but in all honesty, if it's kind of working at the moment, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. So now I could probably touch, there we go. Once there's enough through of the legs, you should then be able to just touch the legs, and that will heat up the solder around the legs and allow both of the legs to then just push through. Right, so I've got two AA's in. I could do with putting a game in, so let me just grab, I've got Pokemon Blue right here. Let's just make sure this is seated properly and it goes in. There we go. Let's give it a turn on. Okay. So the shoulder button should, actually it's not even read the game. Oh, I know what this one's a fake Pokemon Blue. I shouldn't have used this one. This is a recent purchase. Let me just disconnect this. Fake. You can see no, Nintendo didn't put a sticker on, so real. Let's see if this actually makes a difference to whether it boots up or not. Plug it in. There we go. So it's booted up. You can see it's in just kind of 4x3 mode, and the shoulder button should switch it between, let's just turn that down, should switch it between widescreen. So perfect. Okay, so at this point, I think it's probably best that we put on the front lens, just so that's on and done and kind of out the way with. So I'm gonna have to peel off both the inner part, which should just reveal a complete part of the screen with no, although I say this, because we don't need the 3M tape on the inside. There we go. So I'm just lifting up the edge with a knife. That's not sticky, so obviously it's removed the actual sticky part, because we don't need that to be sticky. Whereas around the edge, this is what we need to lift up. I'll see if I can zoom in a bit, get a little bit better of a shot. So I'm going to keep this plastic on just to protect the front for now, and let's just set it up at an angle. Yeah, so once you've got it up, just give it a test to see if it's sticky, just to make sure you're not pulling up the actual residue. And then go ahead and peel it all off. It's quite easy to do. It's nothing, there's no special techniques or tricks. It's kind of just lay it on, drop it in, away you go. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is install the screen so that it's on the front faceplate. That way we don't have to worry about that later on. And then I'll get on to desoldering the tabs for the battery compartment, so we can then work on putting in the rechargeable battery mod, and should be able to do 2 halves and then they come together. So first thing I'm going to do, let's just set the board aside. Let's get out the screen. So when you get the screen out, it will have, well actually this one doesn't, but I think they're supposed to, but if it doesn't, that's fine. We can work around it anyway. There will be a plastic lens on the front, keeping that screen, that LCD screen, protected. On the back, I was expecting a film on the back so that when it's sat in, it doesn't potentially touch any part of the ribbon cable or the motherboard itself and cause any shorts. Now, the kit, the FunnyPlaying IPS version 2 kit, which this is, it comes with some foam and obviously the 3M tape to adhere it. Okay, so my battery on the camera died, but what I was basically saying was we get this foam backing that should sit in between the rear of this. In fact, it'll probably sit like that. Yeah, it'll sit behind it, and that'll give it that insulation that we need. So before we do anything with the screen, I'm going to install this 3M tape. Installing it is pretty straightforward. It's going to go pretty much like this. There's only one way it can go. If you look, there will be, let's zoom in here, there are 3 grooves on this side, on this left side of the shell, and coincidentally there are 3 grooves cut into the 3M tape. So if it's going to go down this way, we need to peel this side off first. So let's go ahead and try to do this. Obviously it's a pain in the backside. Okay, it's not 100% perfect down the right hand side. This is quite difficult because those notches, if they're not cut out deep enough, it's going to refuse to sit. So I'm just going to try and push it along as much as I can, but otherwise it seems to be pretty good. So let's go and make sure it is stuck down all the way around, and then that honestly looks to be okay. So keep the tape on for now on this side, because what we need to do, or what you should do, is make sure that this reverse of the lens is free from dust, fingerprints, and anything else that you don't want in between the screen and the lens. So just give it a wipe down on both sides, because fingerprints on this side, you might think that they are on the inside and sit scrubbing for ages. So that looks to be pretty good. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, so it is a bit of a tight fit. So what I'd say is just be gentle, go with it, give it a bit of a push. If it feels like it's bending, then stop. But this, so on this one, you can see just ever so slightly, it's not gone great with the gasket, that 3M tape, but this is my first one that I'm doing a proper install of, so I'm going to be keeping this one myself. So that's the lens and the screen inserted. For now, we can be done with that. I'm going to turn my attention to the battery terminals on the motherboard, on the board itself. So after removing, or finally removing, the battery terminals from the board, which just seemed to be such a pain in the arse for me, we can now move on to kind of making sure there's enough solder on there to attach some wires for the charge board that would obviously connect into this. So obviously now what we've got to consider is fitting a charge board into the battery compartment of the Game Boy Advance shell. It kind of fits. Obviously I need to do some trimming. I'm convinced this bottom bit does have to come out, even though height wise that's okay. So I'm going to get the Dremel and we'll get onto trimming up the shell so we can fit this in. Okay, so what I'm going to have to do now is just set up our little charge board so that it's ready to accept the wires. And I've been meaning to get one of these kind of helping hands for ages, and this one seemed perfect, so I just picked it up off Amazon. So what we're going to do is just have this board tinned up, ready to accept our wires, like I said. So just a bit of solder on the battery plus and negative, and also the in and out for this battery. So the battery terminals are on the inside, and the terminals that then go to the Game Boy Advance will be on the outside. So let's get this soldered up. Let's make a bit of room for myself. So now I've got that, let's keep my soldering iron on. So now I've got the board kind of almost set up. I picked up this spade connector type thing from I think AliExpress, and this is perfect so that it connects directly into the battery just like so. And then if at any point you need to remove the battery, you can just disconnect this and take the battery itself out without having to desolder anything. So this is going to be basically how the battery is going to connect to our TP 4056 board, and the battery in terminals are in the middle. As I said, the red goes to positive and the black will go to negative, so they should just solder on just like so. Right, okay, so I've got some length of wire here that I just cut and trimmed, and we're going to solder these on to our terminals here. So positive and negative, black's going to be negative, red's going to be positive. Okay, so now we've got those two wires soldered to the board. Just going to make sure, yeah, they're solid enough. The wires are a bit thin, so I'm just going to have to be cautious of handling the board and the wires when things start to get attached. There is a silver band, this is going to point to the direction of the device that you're powering. So this end is going to be going towards the board. There's our battery to put in. There we go. Nice and snug. And then what we'll do is just hold that up there. Spin this boy around. Connect him in. Okay. I will cover that up with Kapton tape, electrical tape, whatever it may be. But for now, it's not going to be touching anything to cause any short circuit. So let's try and power on the Game Boy Advance now. So let's make sure we're in here. Just checking the LED over here. There we go. And it boots up. Excellent. So that's our power source working. Like I said, I'm going to just do a few sort of changes. I won't bother doing these on camera. When I say changes, I mean just putting some Kapton tape around that to insulate it, and then just get things nice and snug into that area. So the next thing we need to do is set up the wires for our ribbon cable here so that we can control the brightness of the display. It's quite straightforward. We've got 4 contacts here, and if you look carefully you'll see one says L, one says R, and one says cell for select. We can ignore the ground one. So what you're going to do, and it really depends, but I think the easiest way of doing this is going to be to solder these wires to the board first, then introduce the ribbon cable and then solder them on. But just before I do that, I'm just going to put some, first of all, flux there, and just tin these pads so they're ready. Okay, just like that, and then they're ready to accept the wire when we introduce them a bit later on. So next, what we now need to do is, even though I've kind of got the board somewhat permanently in place with the power source down here, I can still fold the board out and do any soldering that I need to here. So in this example, what we need to do is go to the left 2 terminals of the shoulder buttons, so this side and this side, and then finally the TP2 point, which will be just there. So I'm going to kind of, there, TP2. So I'm going to actually put some solder on that so it's ready, and get that wire attached first. So a tiny bit of flux there on that. There we go. And let's take our first wire. Okay, that seems to be okay. So now obviously I wasn't very close up with that. You can see there it's attached to the TP2. So again, the left here and the left one here. Since there's quite a bit of solder already, these ones should go on quite nicely. And there we go. So what I'm going to do next is insert the ribbon cable so that we can flip this back over for its final positioning. So insert the ribbon cable with the contacts facing up.
This is a 40 pin version, so I only need to use the 40 pin out. There we go. Let's just go ahead and attach these wires left, right. Right, so they're connected. And then finally, what we're going to probably want to do just before we start putting it fully back together is just get some of these buttons in place. Now I noticed with these buttons and the replacement bumpers that I put, they're just a bit too short to touch. I might have touched upon that earlier on in the video. So what I'm probably going to have to do is at some point maybe put some hot glue just on the inside of here to build this up a little bit because it doesn't quite reach. The best way of lining up the connector here is to go from the side, so you're looking at it this way and real low down, and you can see how it lines up to be pushed in. So just be very careful with this bit because it is delicate to start, and if you do damage it in any way, the ribbon cable is the part you're paying the most for. The screen isn't that expensive. Okay, that seems to be connected. Let's just make sure it sits nicely. There should be a notch cut out for this to sit back a little bit. There we go. And then that will just simply fold over on itself, just like this. And just give it a bit of breathing room. There we go. So like I said, it's not properly together in terms of bumpers and the buttons, but we're just going to test to see and make sure the screen works. So pair of pliers. Ah, there we go, perfect. Let's go ahead and turn that off. And then now we can start to try and put in all of the buttons, etc. I think I know what the issue is now. The foam does not go there. It instead goes in between here. In fact, let me just check again. Yeah, let me just... Okay, come on, sit yourself down, behave. I think that is close. It's just this area with the D-pad and the start select, it's been a bit tight. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just don't want to force it too much, but at the same time probably need to just give it some screws to hold it down. It could just be the foam. So let's get the screws out. Right, let's try and get this properly back together then. So we've got a couple more things to put in, bumpers. Right. Then we'll want the power switch.